Voices are being heard following a late-night town hall in Tyler hosted by East Texas Congressman Nathaniel Moran. Many turned out to hear him speak as Congress works through the first days of the Trump administration. But as GMET's J.D. Conti reports, Congressman Moran was often not the only voice in the room.
Congressman Nathaniel Moran was often drowned out by the sound of the crowd on Tuesday night.
Guides my decision-making process. I think it's a responsibility to the constituents to do those face-to-face town halls, to engage, to be transparent, to be accountable, and to answer questions. And I expected some emotion tonight, and that's what we saw.
Many protesters started their day outside.
As constituents of his are wanting him to realize that we are upset with some of the things that are going on in Washington, and he is all of our representatives, whether we're Democrat, Republican.
One man was asked to leave by hotel staff after yelling expletives at others.
I don't think that some people did get the answers because they weren't listening, because some folks just showed up tonight really just wanted to scream and yell, and that was unfortunate because there was a portion of the group that showed up tonight that really wanted sincerely to hear answers and to have a dialogue, and that's what I wanted too, was a constructive dialogue.
Among the issues,
they're concerned about our 401ks, Social Security, what's going on in Ukraine.
Tariffs were brought up multiple times. Congressman Moran said President Trump is right to close trade gaps and praised the president for the negotiations made so far.
The tariffs as a long-term economic policy, I think there's some real concern there, and so I'm hoping that, and I believe that Trump will be successful in his strategy here.
He told us after the town hall that
long-term Congress will have to be involved.
During the event, pardoned January 6th rioter Ryan Nichols interrupted the congressman.
So, as I understand the question, what we want to be able to do is...
Moran had just finished answering a question involving due process and deportations, something Nichols said he never got.
Right here. And
Moran did tell the crowd later that some January 6ers were treated unfairly.
I wasn't able to hear what he said from the back of the room, and so we answered some January 6 questions tonight, and it's unfortunate that we took that tactic.
As he was leaving the room, Nichols said he is challenging Moran for his seat, even though he already announced he's dropping out of the race. For Good Morning East Texas, I'm J.D. Conti.
Now, Congressman Moran spoke to the crowd for around 2 hours. Questions had to be written down in advance, although he did answer several questions directly. And new this morning, the Smith County GOP chair says he didn't expect to see this in East Texas. In a statement overnight, David Stein says he denounces this type of behavior from any political group, Republican, Democrat, Independent, or any other group. He went on to say, quote, "It's not how we do things here in Smith County."